Hello and welcome. I'm Liz Booker, literary aviatrix, and I am excited to talk with the author of the Aviatrix Book Club discussion book for February 2026, Pitching the Sky, a memoir of triumph against all odds. Fewer than 10% of pilots and aircraft mechanics are women. These are their stories of tenacity, adventure, and courage. Stories with the power to inspire, heal, and connect. Welcome to the Literary Aviatrix community, where we leverage the power of story to build and celebrate our community and inspire the next generation of aviation. Heidi Porch, welcome.
Hello.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about this book. So we're recording this in January. This is going to be the February discussion book for the Aviatrix Book Club, and I'm so excited about it. And you don't know this yet, but I write the column for Aviation for Women magazine. I write a book column for them, and so I decided to write it on this book because I think this one is one that every pilot should read. So for anyone who hasn't had a chance to look at it yet or read it yet, can you give us a synopsis? And I know you said you want to do a little reading.
Sure. Basically, the crux of the book is about an incident that I had back in the 80s when I had a job as a ferry pilot. And with some people, I always have to say that's one E and two R's. And I would deliver single engine Cessnas from the factories in Wichita, fly them to California. We'd take all the seats out, put gas tanks in the cockpit, and then we would deliver them down to Australia and New Zealand. And I never imagined ending up doing a job like that, but my ultimate goal was to be an airline pilot. And I told my parents when I was a very young age that that's what I wanted to do. So growing up, it was all about time building and getting your licenses and getting as many hours as you can. And I thought, what better way to build hours than to fly single engine airplanes over the ocean? So,
She makes
um,
the little
so
crazy symbol. Yes.
yeah, so the book is primarily about it takes in a lot of different aspects. I was trying to reach as large a demographic as I could. So I didn't want to make it all just about the flying. It has to do with a little girl's dream, the struggle to accomplish something in a man's world, how you face emergencies, and do you ultimately reach that dream? And so the book, as I mentioned, is primarily about this incident I had where the engine quit over the ocean. But I use flashbacks to kind of bring together how I got there, people along the way that were mentors, overcoming my own lack of confidence. So it brings in a lot of different elements.
I
Yeah.
agree. I agree. That's why I think it's just a great read. And yes, it would be of interest to a broad audience for a variety of reasons, which we'll talk about, but especially to our young pilots. I think it's really fascinating. So why don't you do you have a little reading you wanted to do?
Sure. Okay. And the book is called Ditching the Sky. And I'm going to start with chapter 1. And the title of chapter 1 goes Pacific Ocean, 540 miles east northeast of Hawaii, August 12th, 1984, 2:14 p.m., 500 feet. Okay, Heidi, master switch off. Good luck. That would be the last radio transmission I would hear from Earl, my wingman, who was flying a Cessna 172 just off my right wingtip. I reached my hand out to the forward instrument panel of the Cessna 182, placed my finger over the toggle switch, and hesitated. I knew that once I turned off the master switch, it would sever all electrical power to my radios. I would be cut off, unable to communicate with Earl, the crew of the Navy P-3 Orion that was circling overhead, and to any other aircraft listening in on the emergency radio frequency. Gone would be any sense of comfort I had received from them. This went against my instincts. I desperately wanted to stay connected, but I knew I had no choice. It was the last item in an emergency procedure that had to be performed. I heard and felt the click from my fingertip pushing the master switch to the off position. It was done.
Whoa, terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. So most people who follow me or who've listened to my other interviews know that I'm a retired Coast Guard helicopter pilot. So I lived this scenario in my brain many, 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 many times. And it's no less terrifying just because I've rehearsed it so many times and was well trained in it, which I look forward to talking about a little bit more. But so I love the way you open the book in the scene in that moment, and then you start with the flashback. So why don't we do that here? How did we get here? So you alluded to it a little bit, but how did you find yourself ferrying an aircraft across the Pacific Ocean?
Well, when I was about 16, I started flying in gliders, and which I think is a wonderful way to start your aviation training because it's just the basics. There's no distractions of engines and radio calls, and you learn about lift and aerodynamics. And so I'm really happy I started in gliders. And then, of course, I wanted to build up to my other ratings. So I really wanted to get into flying the tow planes and get tail dragger experience. So as I worked, my off days towards my private power, commercial instrument, multi-engine, I started towing gliders and got a lot of takeoffs and landings. And, um, and then, of course, the next logical step is to become a flight instructor. So one weekend, I went up to one of these weekend schools to get your multi-engine, and they offered me a job as a flight instructor there. And I said, well, I don't have the rating. And they said, well, we'll give you the rating and you can work it off. So I was about 2 weeks from moving up north to start. And in the meantime, months earlier, I had learned about this company that had moved into the local airport. I lived in Vacaville, California, near Travis Air Force Base. And it was a Net Tree Airport. And this company called Transair had moved in and they ferried airplanes. And I went in and I knew I had low time for what they wanted, but I said, hey, you ever need spur of the moment, last minute pilot? I'm available. And they called me one day and they said, what are you doing tomorrow? We've got 6 airplanes to pick up in Wichita and only 5 pilots. Do you want to go? And I said, yeah, yeah, okay. So off I went, and 6 airplanes go flying back west from Wichita to California, and we had to traverse the Rockies, and we got into some weather, and the owner of the company, who was in a similar aircraft to mine, said, "Tell you what, Heidi, if you can lead us out of here and find our next fuel stop at Milford, Utah, you've got a job." And I
No
don't know
pressure.
how I did it because the weather was coming down, and I found it, and they said, "Alright, if you wanna ferry airplanes, you've got a job." And I thought, flight instruct where the students having all the fun
Right.
or me getting a lot of hours, and so I took that job, but I told them, I said, "I will do all the domestic ferries you want, Wichita to California. Don't ever ask me to do an overwater flight because you guys are nuts." And then about 6 months later, after I learned all of the preparation that went into these overwater flights and hearing the stories about Pango Pango and Hanape and Hawaii, and I thought, I'd like to try it just once, just to say I've done
Just
it, and that's it. And I did and absolutely fell in love with it.
what did you love about it?
This sounds so corny, I know, but you're flying for really long hours. For instance, the first leg from California to Honolulu in a Cessna 182 is about 17 hours
Oh,
and no autopilot. Maybe you have a wing leveler or whatever, but you almost become one with the airplane and you see nothing but ocean for as far as you can see. You feel like you were the only people out there for hundreds and hundreds of miles, and it's kind of a spiritual feeling, and I just loved it, and, the camaraderie with the other ferry pilots, and I had, always a fascination with World War II, and I was seeing islands and locations that were really involved in the
yeah.
war and felt an affinity, maybe in a former life or something. I was a military pilot out there, but yeah, I just in doing something that at the time, I think there were only 17 pilots in the world that did that for a living.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Yeah, that's pretty special. Well, I loved what you said about glider flying. I did not start off in gliders. I flew my flying started in Navy flight training, but since I've retired, I've taken it up, and I'm an absolute convert. And I totally agree with you that everybody should have the experience early in their training of flying gliders. So I mean, I love what you said about it being a simple aircraft, and all you're really doing is managing, energy the whole
mhm,
time.
mhm,
So, I think it's, gives you a lot more confidence around engine out procedures, which definitely helped you in the scenario. Yeah,
yeah.
for sure. So you're how many trips had you done before this trip?
Well, I did about 32 domestic ferries and 9 and a quarter over water flights.
9 and a quarter. So we were a quarter of the way into
Yeah,
this
and that's
flight.
the overall delivery. If you count the longest leg over water we would fly was between Hawaii and American Samoa, or Pango Pango, and that was 2,256 miles. And the shortest leg was about 700 miles. So if you count each of those as a ocean crossing, it was in the 60s.
Yeah, wow.
Mhm.
Wow, incredible. And so what happened on this flight?
I was on my 10th delivery. It was a Cessna 182 fixed gear. And this was the first airplane I had ferried that was used. All the others were brand new from the factory. But we always do a hot oil sample on every airplane before taking them across to see if there's any metal shavings or top overhauls needed. So all that had been done. I was paired up with my boss in a Cessna 172, and we were flying to New Zealand ultimately. So it was the first leg, California to Ho- uh, actually Hilo, which was a little bit closer than Honolulu. This flight planned at 17 hours and 52 minutes. About 11 hours into the flight, I was taking one of my engine readings, and I noticed that the oil pressure was down about 5 psi from the top of the green arc, which is 60, which is not unusual. You're flying for that long of a time, warmer climate, the oil thins out, you get a drop of pressure. So not a big deal. About 20 minutes later, I looked up and it was down another 5. And that's when the hair on the back of my neck started to stand up because I had not seen that before. So I called Earl and told him and asked him if he would fly around my aircraft and look for any signs of oil streaks, exhaust, anything abnormal, which he did. Everything looked fine. And um, I kept staring at it, and it seemed to me like it was ever so slowly continuing to go down. And he said, "Well, what is your oil temp?" And I said, "It's normal, hasn't budged." He goes, "Okay, well, it's probably just an indication system." And my little voice was screaming at me. And I said, "Earl, I think I've got a problem." And he goes, "Well, what do you want to do?" I said, "I think I better call a Mayday," which was so surreal to me. And he said, "Okay, go ahead. Not what I would do, but if you want to do it, go
Right.
ahead."
Thanks,
You
buddy.
know? And so I kind of felt like I was alone in this. And now my hands are shaking, my voice is shaking. I've never called a Mayday. I picture movies, where Mayday, 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 and like I wasn't really sure I had an emergency.
I know, yeah.
So I had a separate HF radio for talking to Honolulu. And I picked it up and I tried to gather my thoughts and I said, "Honolulu radio, Cessna 8032 Mike with a possible Mayday." At the
Yeah.
same time I made that call, there was a Navy P-3 Orion in the vicinity, and they could hear on the HF radio my call. And the lieutenant commander turns to his co-pilot, goes, "Possible Mayday? You're either pregnant or you're not." So he continued listening. And, I said to Honolulu, I said, "I'm a Cessna 182. I'm approximately 600 miles from Honolulu. I'm losing my oil pressure. I don't know how long the engine will continue to run, and I'm requiring assistance." And the P3 guy said, "That's a bona fide emergency." So they waited till I was done talking to Honolulu with all the information they wanted, and then they called me on 121.5 and said, "Did you just give a position report about a half hour ago over Cluck intersection?" I said,
Mhm.
"Yeah." They said, "We passed you going the other way. Do you want us to circle back and see if we could find you?" "Yeah,
Yes,
that would be
please.
nice."
Yes, please.
So they circled back. I gave them my rough coordinates. Now for navigation, this was before GPS and all of that. Um, so I had a Loran C, which was accurate to within 20 or 30 miles, not very good, but I gave them my position and they started in my direction. And in the meantime, um, I started working out an emergency plan. I decided to climb up to 8,500 feet. We normally fly at 5 or 6,000 feet to keep full power on the engines, but I wanted a little extra breathing space in a descent. So I started a climb, started talking to Earl about engine failure procedures, ditching procedures. And then I saw up ahead some contrails at a high altitude. And we used to fly to Hawaii westbound on high altitude eastbound airways, so we could see contrails and get position fixes from them. Yeah, because 'cause we're no conflict with them, we're such low
Mhm.
altitude. So I was able to contact, this aircraft up ahead, and it turned out to be a Qantas 747. So when they were directly overhead, I asked them to do an S turn, so I could definitely identify them, and when they were directly overhead, they gave me a lat long off their equipment. And within 15 minutes, the P3 had me in sight. So that was a huge relief, and they started coordinating with search and rescue in Hawaii, Coast Guard, Navy, everybody they could. So that was a huge help.
Yeah.
Um, it took another hour 40 minutes. My mind is a little fuzzy as to time,
Yeah, I'm
but
sure.
the oil pressure just kept slowly dropping. Oil temp never budged, and, I started, coming up with my own procedure should the engine quit. So I kinda cherry picked what fit my situation from the Cessna operating manual for engine failure because they assume you're gonna be over land, and one for the ditching procedure, and added a few items of my own. My biggest fear was surviving the impact because with a fixed gear airplane, it's either going to flip onto its back or cartwheel. And I had 2 gas tanks inside the cockpit with me. And the forward gas tank, which is where the co-pilot seat would be, the top edge of the tank was about 6 inches from my temple. And the Navy guys were advising me on the safest way to ditch. They said I should stall the airplane
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's the slowest forward momentum and that. Well, I also was concerned about hitting my head on the instrument panel and being knocked out. So I wanted to have my life raft in my lap to use kind of like an airbag.
Mhm.
The problem with that was in order to have enough room in my lap for the, raft, I had to move my seat all the way back. I couldn't reach the rudder pedals anymore, and I couldn't see over the nose.
Yeah.
The gas tank on the right had all the radios and equipment on top, so the only place I could see outside was out the left window,
Yeah.
and I thought if I stalled the airplane the least bit too high, one wingtip might drop and it'll cartwheel. I could hit the side of my head on the edge of the tank and be knocked out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had to go against what everybody was telling me. And I needed to keep airflow over the wings so I could keep the wings level
Yeah.
and hopefully keep it going straight. So I told them that's what I was going to do. And they didn't argue with me. I could kind of tell they were disagreeing, but you know, I was the one behind the controls. So
For
okay,
sure.
whatever you want to do,
Yeah.
Heidi. So the engine finally quit. And I just immediately reverted back to my glider days. It just felt like a big, heavy glider. So totally natural. I had perfect airspeed control and got the raft in my lap. There's a lanyard you can pull out from the side of it. And I tied that around my waist because I was going to open the door before touching down. So if it did cartwheel, the fuselage might torque and I could be trapped. So I had the door open. And if the raft went out the door, at least I would still be tied to it. Glided down. Fortunately, it was daytime and the swells were like 2 feet and the wind was under 10 knots, so it's just about perfect.
Yeah.
I touched down, the mains hit and bounced, but it kept going forward. The nose hit, grabbed, and then it just pitched over onto its back. And I remember as it was pitching forward, I remember hearing myself go, like, I don't know if out of shock or out of the pressure from the deceleration, but in that breath, I had water. So I think the windshield blew out. It was just an explosion of water. And immediately it felt like the plane was sinking like a rock. It wasn't. I think my feet might have been above water, but it felt like it was sinking. And I flashed back to a time when I was 4 years old, and we were at a big family party, and they had a swimming pool, and while everyone was eating, I fell into the swimming pool and clinically drowned. And I had no heartbeat, no pulse, nothing by the time they found me. And fortunately, it was right when CPR was brand new, and there was one person at that party that worked for the Red Cross and knew how to do it. But it took me 7 years to get into a pool after that, and I don't like the water, and all I can do is the dog paddle. That's it. So, I I can't open my eyes underwater, never have been able to, but I sensed that I remember there was a door on one side and a gas tank on the other, and I took my hands out and I pushed, and the right hand hit the tank and the left hand hit the door and moved it open, and then I just started moving in that direction, and I could tell through my eyelids that I was going in the right direction and got some air. And then there was the problem of getting into the raft, and that was quite difficult. Um, I the good thing about flying a high-wing airplane in a ditching with it upside down, it's now a low-wing airplane, so I had a platform to
Mhm.
stand up.
True. Yep.
So, I had a life vest on, military issue, and I pulled the tabs, and all it did was unfold, it didn't inflate. And I thought, "What next?"
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
"Don't worry about it, don't worry about it, just get in the raft." And I dog paddled to the raft, and my raft is exactly the size that Tom Hanks had in Castaway, if you recall that one.
Mhm.
And I attempted to push myself up into the raft, and I'd get, like, halfway in, then I get pulled back into the water. I tried again, same thing. After the 3rd time, I looked down, and that lanyard was much longer than what I had anticipated, and it was wrapped around my ankle, and it must have been caught to the airframe somewhere. So I swam back to the wing, got up on the wing, untangled my ankle, jumped back into the water. The raft had been moving away from me a little bit, so I'm dog paddling over to it, took every ounce of strength I had, and I pushed myself up and fell into the raft. And I realized that had the life vest inflated when I first pulled the tabs, I would not have had the leverage to get in. So that would have been a big problem. So now I thought my problems were over. I was going to maneuver back to the airplane and get all these extra supplies out. And I had a flare gun and a radio and food, you name it. And so the raft didn't have oars, but I was, trying to paddle towards the airplane, and I was not getting anywhere. And then I heard a weird noise, and I turned, and that lanyard was still caught to the airframe somewhere, and it was pinning the raft against the rudder of the plane and just scraping. And I had this image of letting air out of a balloon.
Yeah. For sure.
Well, mounted inside the raft was a knife as part of the minimum equipment, and so I managed to get the knife out and hack away at the lanyard and immediately started drifting away. So I was not able to get back to the airplane to get any supplies or anything like that. Yeah.
So that everything that you just described was just so I mean, there were so many things that you did really well, and then there were so many things that like when I think about our training that we had all the time that could have just prepared you to just had a little bit better, just a little bit better
Yeah.
experience. Or just even like there is already like the terror of having just crashed an aircraft into the water, that now you're doing all of this stuff for the very first time in your life. You're upside down in the water for the first time, we're strapped into a plane, and that's never happened before. You've never had to climb up into a raft, in the open ocean before. These are things that we practiced so that, and that's one of the things that I hope that people who find themselves maybe doing this mission, if you can scrape together some money, or if the company, I don't know if the company should be required to send you to some kind of, water life-saving training. How well prepared did you feel?
Well, most of what I had learned was I had a copy of the Air Force Survival Manual. I had read that. I'd talked to a few other ferry pilots who had had to ditch. Um, we had wanted to see if we could get permission to go in to use the Dilbert Dunker, but they
Mhm.
wouldn't let civilians do that. And I had wanted to go into the military pilot training, but at my age, the only branch of the service that was allowing females to fly was in helicopters in the Army.
Army, yeah.
And I really wanted fixed wing because my ultimate goal was to be an airline pilot. Um, so yeah, I wasn't able to get any of that formal training that would have been nice. But so mostly it was just what I picked up from other people and trusting my gut
Yeah,
and because every situation is different, you know.
yeah.
So
Well, it was impressive, just that you were able to get through all of that. And now, and I mean, what you had going for you was the communications first and foremost, and the fact that they had somebody like right there, or, the P3 was paying attention and was like, let's go divert. And then I know that in the background, they kind of set up a rotation of other aircraft coming out to
yes.
relieve. And, and then this really interesting thing happens.
So we're
So
gonna
tell us
tell
about
them.
that. Yeah, yeah, I don't know, I mean, it was
Spoiler
part of the it's
alert.
part of the blurb. Oh,
Yes. Well,
yeah,
the last radio call before the ditching with Honolulu and with the Coast Guard was that they were going to dispatch a destroyer from Pearl Harbor to come get me. And I knew that I was 540 miles from Hawaii. So I knew that was going to take well over 24 hours, maybe 28, 29. So, and what I didn't know at the time was that they were not going to dispatch the destroyer until they knew if I survived or not. Because, yeah, why waste a lot of fuel and time?
yeah, I guess. I don't
So,
know if that's really the right answer, but okay.
yeah, yeah. So off and on during the day, there were a mix of C-130s out of Barbers Point and P3s that would check on me. Every time a plane came over, they'd drop a sonobuoy to keep track of my progress. And one of them did drop supplies, but they went the other direction. And yeah, another interesting aspect, which you'll have to read the book to find out about that. Um, so I ditched at 2 in the afternoon, and now it's around midnight, and the weather got much worse, and the swells were 10 to 13 feet. And about every third or fourth swell, a little water would splash into the raft. And I was cold, and I was always sitting in about this much water. And I noticed more airplanes were coming out, more than usual. Normally there'd be one, maybe two, but now I saw like three airplanes, and they were circling me and dropping these parachute flares, which I don't know if that's the right term for them, but they're the ones that take forever to
Yeah, they
hit the
light up
surface
the
and
point is to
they
light up the area, the search
oh,
area. Exactly
they
right.
do a great
Yeah.
job. And it was a full moon too, which really helped. I mean, I could have read a book
Yeah,
easily there.
yeah,
So they
that's
were
nice.
dropping all these flares, and then way off on the horizon, I saw a very bright light from a ship. So it was clear they were leading this ship towards me, and um, which was great. And silly me, I thought, oh, great, the ship's just going to pull up, drop me a rope, and that's it. I'm done. I'm picked up. Well, the ship stopped about, maybe I'm terrible at judging distances, but I'm guessing it was a little over a quarter mile away. Stopped, and it had 2 big searchlights up on the deck, and the searchlights are moving everywhere, the planes are circling, and I had in my minimum supplies in the raft 1 handheld rocket flare, and I didn't wanna fire it if the searchlights were looking the wrong direction. I waited till they were pointed towards me, but I was beyond the range of their light, but at least they were looking in the right direction, and I fired the flare, and the ship started moving away, and that was the worst experience of the whole thing because I thought they were leaving, and I thought another half hour, I'm gonna capsize, and that's it.
Yeah.
Well, they were just looking in another area. But what was happening at that time, and I found all this out later, was that one of the airplanes during the day that had checked on me and then was going back to Hawaii saw a ship, and he tried calling it on the universal frequency, and they didn't answer. He tried everything, and they wouldn't answer. So he marked its location on his map. He went back. He was supposed to be done for the day, but he refueled, came back out, found the ship again, flew across its bow and started dropping flares, which is the maritime, "We've got an emergency."
Mhm.
The ship, not knowing anything except somebody was in trouble, turned around and for hours followed lines of flares being dropped by numerous aircraft because the planes would drop a few flares and then they'd have to hold till the ship would catch up, and then some more, and that plane would have to leave, and another one would come out. So
Crazy.
it was quite confusing. So they led this ship to me. Well, in the meantime, the Coast Guard got in touch with an American ship that was close, and they gave them my coordinates to come pick me up. So they headed for me. So with all these planes going back and forth, the planes that were on target on me and looking at the ship were telling them, "Turn to the right. She's right in front of you. Turn to the right. She's right there. Turn to the right." And the American ship said, "We've just done a 360-degree right-hand turn. We don't see her." Well, the pilots were looking at hadn't budged. The American ship had been given the wrong coordinates, and they were 20 miles south.
Yeah.
The ship they were looking at was a Soviet refrigeration vessel, and they didn't know what they were looking for, a cruise ship, an airliner, a sailboat. They were just following flares. That
Crazy.
was it. So now, the pilots are totally confused, and, because 'cause they're not talking to the ship near me, and at this time, I had already fired, the 1 rocket flare I had. That didn't work, and all I had left was a whistle that was packaged in supplies, and I thought I heard the sound of an engine launch in the water, but I couldn't see it. I thought, "Well, if I can hear that, maybe they'll hear the whistle." And so, are you familiar with the musician Dizzy Gillespie, who's the trumpet
Yes.
player? I
Yeah,
remember how big
the trumpet, yeah.
and I blew that whistle so hard, I thought my cheeks were just gonna rip open,
Yeah,
and they homed in on the whistle, and
amazing.
they came and threw me a rope, and I pulled myself up, they pulled me up, and they pulled my raft up, and I didn't know who they were. I mean, they were yakking and talking, and they took me down below this little area with a couple of benches and gave me a better life vest, and finally, I just said, "American, Ruski," and I went, "Shit,"
Oh, shit.
'cause it
Exact
was the Cold War,
I know, it's 1980 what?
84.
1984.
Yeah, But then I
And
thought, "Oh, Heidi, don't worry about it. The airplanes obviously will figure out who this is, the diplomats will work it out. I'm safe,"
yeah,
and so it was
so you
quite
had
the
this
experience.
crazy adventure, and I loved reading about that experience and the hospitality that they showed you, how that made you feel, and then you got transferred to a US
Mhm.
not active military
They
merchant.
call they called it a gray ship. So it's a Navy ship with a civil service crew under contract to the Navy.
Yes, I don't know
It's
why I'm blanking on the name of that, but yes, it's one of those.
Maritime Sea Lift Command or
Sea
something.
Lift Command, yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so basically a Navy-ish boat.
Right,
And
right.
I loved that you had some time on there to get ready for pulling into port, that, you talk about how you got to sit down and write everything down.
Yeah, I'm so glad
So
I did that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, how incredible. Like, were you able to finish it while you were out there?
Yeah, because it took about 27 hours to get to
Okay.
Pearl, and so I just asked the captain if there was a place I could sit down and use some paper. I ended up writing, I think, 16 pages on a legal pad, and that was very helpful when it came time to write the book because I had forgotten a
I
lot of
bet.
details. Yeah,
I bet.
and then they kept calling me up to the bridge, um, because it was the Cold War, this was a big deal, and they wanted me to do a press conference at Pearl once we got into port. And so they were asking me, "Will you talk to NBC? Will you talk to ABC?" "Yes, yes, 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 and we'll give you a hotel, and we'll do this." And I was kind of a shy person and never wanted to ask for things, but I am just kicking myself every time. Why didn't I ask to meet Tom Selleck?
That's right.
He was
I was
doing Magnum
laughing.
TI then. I didn't do it. A missed opportunity.
You're so funny. I loved
Yeah.
that. That was funny. Yeah, and you just had this barrage of, the public relations folks all over you, just swarming you, the press, for a while. Sounded
Yeah,
really overwhelming.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's odd because to me, it didn't seem like a big deal. It was just a mishap and, you know, did the
Yeah.
best I can, and I had an awful lot of help, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
but it's an interesting story with a happy ending, so I could definitely
yes.
see the hook there, very interesting with the Russians having picked you up, all this good Samaritan, and our resources that are designed and standing by to support, events like this. They have an opportunity to respond, and it has a happy ending, so I could definitely see the hook there for sure. It was a great story. It's such a compelling read. Everybody go get a copy of this book. Like, you can read this, you can read this in a weekend. You can read it on a short, weekend trip or in a flight across the country and back. It's definitely worth it. A lot of things resonated with me. Like I said, obviously Coast Guard and flying over the water. That spent a lot of my career there, but I also jumped in a pool when I was 3.5 years old after a beach ball. I did not drown. I did not drown like you did, but I, like, vividly remember, like, when I got to that scene in the book, because the whole time I'm having my normal cringe over, being in the water that way. um, and then you get to this flashback to your childhood experience. It's traumatizing to read, as somebody who had a close call myself, and then I've also grabbed children out of the water too, so
Boy, yeah,
yeah, so it's
you
pretty
can
emotional,
relate. Yeah.
um, significant emotional event that happened to
Mhm.
you and that you were having to relive in a traumatic situation, so really
But,
compelling.
I tend to believe things happen for a reason,
Yeah,
and had that drowning incident not happened, I would have died in this ditching.
you talk about that.
Yeah.
I think your rationale is very interesting around that, so
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. So then you went on to have the career that you hoped to have. That, and we don't get a whole lot of that in the book. So tell us, what have you been doing since then?
Well, after the ditching, they did offer me another ferry flight, but first of all, I would have had to replace all the emergency equipment that went down, and that's your own responsibility. So no, and also I figured I'd put my parents through enough. And I had lost my fiance in a ditching years earlier and thought it's time to move on. So I went to work for a commuter airline, Pioneer, in Denver, flying Metroliners. And then 7 months later, got hired by Republic Airline, based in Minneapolis, and went right into the DC-9 and flew 4 different models of DC-9. After 8 years, moved to the right seat of the Airbus 320. And then after being with the airlines for 10 years, made captain on the 9, and then captain on the 320. And then my favorite jump, I went to the right seat of the Boeing 747-400
Oh,
and flew internationally for 15 years. And that was the epitome of my career
what
outside.
company was that for?
Pardon me?
What company was that for?
Well, Republic ended up merging with Northwest Orient to become Northwest. So that
Northwest.
was
Okay.
Northwest.
Okay.
And then eventually Northwest merged with Delta. So, and then they retired the 747 fleet, and then I moved to the left seat of the Airbus 330. And then COVID hit, and I took early retirement, which I really did not want to do. It was tough. Uh, but they were threatening to furlough like 2,000 pilots. And I only had 14 months left till mandatory retirement. And I thought, can I really stick around for 12 months while somebody with a family's being put on the street, you know? So I took the early out and, but then got a job flying a Gulfstream 500 for a private couple right in my local town, Santa Rosa.
That's awesome.
And boy, that was a culture shock.
I bet.
That thing was a rocket. It was holy cow, that was really fun. And flew that for about 2 years and then had a medical issue, and, decided, people have been bugging me for 40 years to write my book, and I have no more excuses.
Oh.
But yeah, so it gave me the time I needed to do that.
So tell me about that process. So you finally decided you were going to write the book. What did that look like for you?
Well, years ago, I happened to be on a YouTube aviation channel called Flywire. He was doing it's all aviation about any topic you can imagine. And somehow the host heard about me and I did this interview for him. And afterwards, I started reading the comments. And there were about 200 comments and only one negative, and all the other people jumped on this guy. So I didn't have to do anything. But a lot of them said, "Where's the book? Where's the book?" And while I was working at the airlines and telling my story to captive audience in the cockpit, they said, "Oh, you should write a book." And I thought they were just being nice, you know? But to see all these comments from perfect strangers, that's when I realized, "Okay, I
Yeah.
really do this."
Yeah.
And it seemed overwhelming to me because I envisioned, you see movies of where the characters are authors and they're struggling to write a book and they've got piles of papers all over their desks and books and index cards on the floor. And I'm thinking, I don't know how to do this. It was really intimidating. how to get started, the process. And finally, I just said, screw it. I'm just going to sit down and start typing.
There you go. That's
And
all you
that's
gotta
what
do.
I did. I didn't have an outline, didn't I mean, I gathered all the, uh, resources I had, photographs, the flight plans. I signed up for Facebook again, and I was able to get in contact with a couple of guys that were on the P3, and they filled in a lot of information for me. And, so it took me about 2 years to write it, but 6 months might go by where I didn't write anything.
Okay.
Just kind of when I felt like it. First, the house had to be clean.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All of the
Thought
excuses.
about my chores, had a glass of Chardonnay, and I would just yeah, and sometimes I'd work for 3 or 4 days at a time and then nothing for a few weeks, and then my friends would bug me, "Heidi, you written today?" "No." "Okay." 'Cause I had a few friends that made me promise I would send them chapters as I finished them. So they kinda nagged me in the back, which was a big help.
Yeah, some accountability partners.
Yeah.
That's
But
good.
I'm kind of kicking myself that I made it seem more of a big deal than it was to get started. I just
Yeah.
got this perception that you have to do it this way, and
Yeah.
no, it's whatever suits you.
It's
Yeah.
your story.
Mhm.
When you're talking about, like, research projects and learning about other people, that's what it looks like maybe, but this is your story, so it's however you wanna tell it. And you did a lovely job, and so that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about also. How did you make decisions about how to structure this story and the way that you jump back and forth in time to that scene?
Yeah, I struggled with that, but I think my biggest priority was to grab the reader first chapter,
Mhm.
so that's why I started with the actual, engine the engine has failed and I'm on my way down, and then go to flashbacks because I thought if I did it in a chronological I was born in Palo Alto, California, and when I was I would lose the reader. It would take too long to get to the drama. So I wanted to break it up into like the end of the first chapter, the last word is impact. Okay, now like, oh, what's going to happen next? Well, the next chapter goes back to when I was young
Yeah.
and talks
It's
about
very effective. I really liked it. I didn't know if that was all you made those decisions independently or if you had an editor who you worked with. How did you
No, I did the structure of the book all on my own.
Nice.
I knew nothing about publishing. The research I did on my own, it seemed like, it used to be you could send in a cold manuscript to publishing houses.
Yeah. Now you
Can't
have
do
an
that
agent.
anymore. You have to have a literary agent. In order to have a literary agent, you had to have a marketing plan and demographics, and I didn't wanna go through that. So I had, an acquaintance at work, her name's Carlene Pettit, and
Oh,
she's
oh, we
yeah,
know Carlene.
okay. So I called Carlene and said, "What
Okay.
do I do?" And she was a big help, and I sent her a copy of the manuscript, and she had some really good, recommendations for how to make the first chapter more dramatic and this and that. And then she introduced me to her editor, and I met him, but his editing was more for, uh, punctuation, grammar, format, and getting it ready for uploading to Ingram Spark, to a
Mhm.
self-publishing platform. He
Perfect.
didn't really give any editing for, "You should maybe change, this scene to include" none of that. So the uh, context of the book was completely me. But so anyway, I ended up self-publishing, and
Nicely done.
it worked out.
Do we get to can we look forward to an audiobook version?
There is an audiobook.
Okay.
I did it probably the wrong way, but as soon as I uploaded it to Ingram Spark, I did it in hardback and paperback and ebook. And then I found a recording studio in
Yeah, okay. I don't know why I missed that.
Berkeley, and I narrated the book, and it was so much fun. They give you a director. He was great. We did it in about 11 hours. And so all 4 formats are available, um, in tomorrow, and I have to be really careful here. Tomorrow, there might be an announcement.
By the time that this gets published, tomorrow will be a few weeks ago.
Okay,
Okay, so what can we say?
k so what I say right now won't get out till tomorrow
It's
or the
not gonna
day
get
after?
out. I promise it even won't even be out tomorrow because there's no way I'm gonna get to editing this and publishing it by then.
Okay. I got an email last week from the Audio Awards, and my audiobook is a finalist
Oh,
for
fun.
the Audio Awards.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, but I'm not supposed to tell anybody until they announce it tomorrow.
Well, congratulations, Heidi.
So, and last year's winner was Whoopi Goldberg.
What the hell?
Yeah, it's like the Oscars
Oh
of
my god.
audiobooks. Yeah, it's gonna
That would
be
be
in New York,
amazing.
and, yeah, at a ceremony
Okay, okay, so but do tell me that you are out there on social media promoting all this. Where can we find you?
Well, I'm so bad. I know nothing about social media. I'm on Facebook, but
Uh-huh,
under my name,
uh-huh.
and you can get the book through Amazon. You can go do a search on Amazon through my name or the name of the book in Barnes and Noble. And I've been doing podcasts,
Do you have a
and
website?
I don't have a website. I should do that, huh?
You should do that. Yeah.
Okay, that's my next.
I'm gonna send you something. I'm
Okay,
gonna send I'm gonna send you my author's, guide according to Liz Booker.
okay, all
I don't know
right.
what
'Cause
you need.
I know. I like I said, I joined Facebook years ago and got off of it because I just didn't like, and
Yeah.
then once I did the book, I go, "I have to go back on Facebook to get the word out." So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was a lot, but, the podcasts have helped a lot spread the word, and I am working with a producer. Right now, there's interest in making it into a movie, and we've got a script. And so now we're right at the cusp of starting to knock on doors, to look for financing.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, Heidi, this has been an amazing. Do you have any advice that you want to give to young pilots or people who have been told many, many times that they should write a book? Do you have advice for either of those groups of people?
Don't do what I did and take
Which
40 years.
okay.
Don't make it harder than it really is, and there's no right or wrong way to write your story
I love it.
because nobody knows your story like you do.
That's right.
So
That's
if it
right.
means writing on the back of dinner napkins when a good thought comes to you and then put them in a shoebox, that works.
Exactly.
It helps to have a few good friends that are sounding boards that will tell you the truth. That helps
Mhm.
a lot.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I wish I'd done it sooner, but who knows? Maybe the time wasn't right, and my story hadn't finished. You know, I hadn't retired yet. So, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you need that perspective.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much for finally writing it and for sharing it with us. We're super excited to talk about it, and we hope that you'll join us in the book club discussion on the last Sunday of February. It'd be
Great. I will
amazing.
put that on my calendar, and thank you so much for reaching out and finding me, and
Of course,
I
my
really enjoyed
pleasure.
talking to you.
Same to you.
Then he